everyone. Welcome to the Ashley Barlow Company podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host. If you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who works at a school, or you're a community member, a volunteer, or a staff member at an organization that supports people with special education plans, a coach, a tutor, or even a grandparent, you're in the right place. Sit back with an ice cold glass of lemonade, put on your walking shoes and grab some headphones, roll down the windows and cruise. Ready, set, go. Educate, advocate, collaborate. Welcome back to another episode of Special Education Advocacy with Ashley Barlow. I'm Ashley Barlow, and I'm so happy you're here. Today, I want to introduce you to my friend, Jena Wells. I met Jena when she was working at the Down Syndrome Association of Greater Cincinnati as the Early Matters Coordinator. I want to tell you a little bit about Jena before we hop into our episode. Jena Wells is a dynamic mentor and subject matter expert to numerous families within the disability community. She is passionate about creating inclusive opportunities, access, and a sense of belonging for those she has served. She has worked in the nonprofit sector throughout her career, empowering families to establish their own personal path. Jena received a Bachelor of Science in Family Community Services with a specialty in health-related topics. She is a leader that cherishes relationship building and has a strong emotional intelligence. Jena uses her skills to manage programs, advocate, collaborate, and educate with others. She aspires to learn and grow through her work each day while delivering results. Inspiration from Jena comes from her family and her friends. Jena and her husband were blessed with a son who happens to have Down syndrome. He has connected them to a remarkable disability community in which they are deeply involved. She enjoys spending time on nature walks and playing activities with her family while soaking up the rays. Throughout Jena's life, she has been a big picture thinker with the ability to manage high ambiguity. She enjoys planning, creating, and executing a vision through fruition. Her favorite quote and one she tries to live by is, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader." And that's John Quincy Adams. Without further ado, let's hop into the episode on advocacy with Jena Wells. Hi, Jena.
Hi, how are you, Ashley?
I'm great. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited for you to share your story and your expertise with my audience. Why don't you start off and tell my audience a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your family, what you do, why you care about the disability community.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I am Jena Wells, and I have a family that is, I don't know, just not your typical family. My husband is English. I'm always known as the wife of the English man, because everyone remembers him and his accent. But yes, Mark is my husband, and we have four just awesome boys. And our oldest is 14 now. He's going to be going off to high school next year, which is crazy to think about. That's Steven. And then Jordan is our 13-year-old in middle school. And then we have Ashton, who's 11, and Kieran, who is 9 now. So they're kind of all getting older and keeping us busy. So Ashton is our man that is the reason why I've gotten involved in the disability community, as he has Down syndrome and ADHD and anxiety disorder. So we, are learning along the way with lots of other families, and it's been such a blessing to have the disability community, to walk this journey with.
Yes, and that's how we know each other, and I will second that. The disability community is a wonderful place for connection and support and learning, and that's why this podcast exists. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about advocacy and kind of lots of different ways of advocacy, but I think your professional background really weighs into the reason that you kind of found a passion for advocacy. So share a little bit about your professional background too.
Yeah, so my alma mater is Michigan State University. I graduated there so many years ago, and I have a Bachelor of Science in what's called Family Community Services. I specialize in other health related topics and in the child development of children under 8. So it's interesting that that is the field that I chose. I wanted to find a way to work with families and to support communities of people that have health related issues going on within their families. And then I have Ashton. So it was kind of, interesting that, he came along, but I'm so thankful because I had some of that professional background. Went off, got married to England, came back, and started my career. So I've been working with families for over 20 years now. Got involved in the Down syndrome community after Ashton was born, and worked at the Down Syndrome Association for 7 years ish. And then COVID hit. I needed to be a little bit more present with all of my boys, especially with Ashton. We had kind of a rough year at school in 3rd grade. And so I just knew that I needed to be there for him and advocate even more. And so, so my whole career, then I went off to Lend, and we'll talk about Lend, I'm sure, a little bit more. And now I'm working at Global. So my professional career has kind of grown as I've learned along the way. And gosh, I've met some of the most brilliant people within the disability community that have given me the opportunity to do what I love and kind of go after my passions too.
So great. So great. So when you say the Down Syndrome Association, you're talking about Greater Cincinnati, which is our local one here. And then Global is the Global Down Syndrome. Is it Foundation?
It is Foundation. Yeah.
Global Down Syndrome Foundation. So in the Down Syndrome community, there are, we kind of say there's 4 nationals. There's the National Down Syndrome Society, National Down Syndrome Congress. There is the Global Down Syndrome Foundation, and then there is Down Syndrome Affiliates in Action, which is, kind of for all the different affiliates across the country. Down Syndrome Association of the Midlands, Club 21 out in Pasadena, of course, the DSAGC here in Greater Cincinnati, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you are very connected. I know you've spoken at some of those national conferences and conventions, and, that is a huge benefit by way of networking. How has your professional kind of training and background really fed into your work as an advocate? How has that helped you to prepare for your advocacy journey?
Yeah, so honestly, it's funny because I didn't know that I was advocating when I started advocating. So that actual term came with my more professional training, I guess, as I got further and further into just with my children. And it started with my oldest son. He had a speech delay when he was younger, and I had to advocate for an IEP for him and to support him through that. And that was really the first time that I didn't know it was called advocating, but that's what I essentially was doing because the school didn't necessarily see his delay as prominent enough to give him the services. We've essentially got it, but that was because I kind of pushed for and had to prove, and advocate for him. And then Ashton came along, and advocacy for Ashton started at birth, really, and even before birth. When we found out he had Down syndrome, we found out he had a heart defect. Those are the things that kind of got us started in advocating more seriously, I guess. And then obviously it continued through his childhood and definitely when he started school and advocating at the school and, making sure that his needs are met when it came to his education too. So,
You know what I love? I love that I asked you how your professional training made you an advocate. And but I love this. I seriously love it. And you just spent however, like, we could time it, but let's say 2 minutes talking about how you didn't even know what you were doing was advocacy. Now you're like, add to your list of titles, advocate, and you didn't even know that that's what you were doing. And then you went and got some training because you were like, I should probably learn more about this. And
yes.
I think that is such an important message for parents across the world to hear, is like, you don't have to set out to be an advocate. Life circumstances make you an advocate. And then if you choose, you can get more training to be even more effective.
Yes, absolutely. And the training, the professional training, or I guess the more, I don't know, streamlined training for advocacy is out there, and it's great. We have lots of opportunity to learn how to advocate, but I'll be honest, it starts with the passion. It starts with the why, right? And so that's what, and that's why I didn't even know I was advocating in the beginning, and what I've now learned that can look like, and what steps we can take to learn more about the verbiage we use, or the language that we're not just verbal language, but you know communication in general, and how we can use that to advocate for our children, because advocacy is not easy. It's hard sometimes. And so having the training to go behind that why and that passion and the emotion side of it is, it's helpful to have the training behind it too.
So I just did a podcast, I think it's number 43, on adding the objectivity to the subjectivity in your advocacy. And that's exactly what it is. Like,
Yes.
it's so, I love the way you said that though. Like, your passion started your why. So
Mhm.
that's the subjective, like well, I'm the mom and I just know. But then you went out and you sought training so that you could make your advocacy more effective. And what that training essentially does is teaches you how to blend objectivity with the subjectivity. So I love that. Why don't you tell us about some of the trainings that you have done, like ways that you've empowered yourself to be a better advocate?
Well, again, I worked at the Down Syndrome Association of Greater Cincinnati, and that started, I'm so grateful for having that position, because I was able to attend conferences. I was able to seek out professional development, but also development that was helping me personally too. So, and, advocating for my own son, but also advocating for the disability community and those with Down syndrome specifically. So I attended a lot of conferences. Like you had mentioned before, NDSC, National Down Syndrome Coalition, they, and actually this week is their conference, and I'm attending this week. I think you are too. And
yes, I'm speaking too.
you are speaking, yes. And so, and it's just a great conference and a great place to learn more about advocacy, and also lots of other topics too. But I always tended to kind of walk towards the advocacy sessions a little bit more than some of the others, just because I know that our community, I'm here, I have the honor of listening to so many families and supporting families, and hearing what the needs are. And so having that voice for lots of families is so important. So that's kind of how I view my role.
For sure. So I know that you've done some of those things, and obviously, national organizations that would be pertinent to my audience's causes would certainly be helpful. So, that might be International Dyslexia Association,
Yes. Yep.
Autism Speaks, or, a CP organization that's local or national in your area. or, of course, a Down syndrome affiliate, something like that. And there are also national and local organizations that are more widely focused, like just disability or learning disabilities or something like that. And I think those are all great places to look. But I know that you also did Lend. So
Yeah.
tell us about your experience in Lend. And I'll have you explain. Why don't you start off by telling everybody what Lend is? I'm pretty sure it's an acronym. So
It is.
tell us about Lend.
Yes. So Lend is through AUCD. It's actually funded through AUCD. What does AUCD stand for? I am, I can look that up real quick if we need to, but that is for the broader disability community as well. And I just want to make sure that I get it right. It's the Association of University Centers on Disability. So AUCD is a national organization, and they provide this Lend program in certain areas of the nation. Did you have a
So
question?
I want to say something about AUCD quickly. AUCD, I think, oversees or empowers the UCEDs,
They do.
UCEDD, so the University Centers in Excellence for Developmental Disabilities.
Yes.
But I think also Lend other organizations can buy Lend. So I think like a spin in Kentucky, we don't have a UCED, we have Kentucky Spin.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think Spin could buy Lend and could run Lend if they wanted to. Or like, I think our Lend in Kentucky, if it is offered someplace, I think it's offered through the Human Development Institute, which other states
It
have
is
also.
in Kentucky. Yes, you are
Okay.
correct. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that
Yep.
because, people are listening from everywhere. So
No, you're correct. Yeah. So every state does look a little different. And in Ohio, where I live, it's there's actually two USEDs and there's two Lend programs. But typically, there's in some states there might only be one. They are few and far between, the Lend program, typically one or two per state. So it is it's a great opportunity for someone that wants to learn more. Lend stands for Leadership Education in Neurodiversity, or in Leadership Education in Neurodiversity and Related Disabilities. So, so we basically learned a lot about leadership, advocacy. There we followed a certain protocol of topics that we wanted to hit on, that supports the disability community as a whole. And we followed through. And AUCD, the reason I mentioned AUCD is because that is another really good place if you're interested in advocacy. They have a lot of information about advocacy, and what they do as well is they kind of, for me anyway, they kind of dumb down some of the terminology that I'm not so great at. Not a lawyer like you, Ashley. So some of those words I don't necessarily get.
Well, but there's a lot that, I think that's a really great point that so we all have to start someplace, right? And like it drives me crazy when people don't just ask questions, So if you don't understand something, ask a question. Yeah, you might feel like a fool, but if you have a question, somebody else probably has a question. So you might be helping somebody. But in addition to that, like, it's okay that it's new to you. It's okay that you're here to learn. And so ask questions. I think that's another sign of a good leader.
It certainly is. And, asking the questions and then really listening to the answers and then following through with what you had heard is another really important step in leadership as well. And so, we learned a lot within the Lend program. It's very intensive. It's a lot of work. We do a lot of project work. We do research. And we get to go to our state legislators. We get to go to our national legislators through Lend. So it was a great opportunity for me, and I'm just so thankful that I got to complete that. And now I get to move forward and work at Global Down Syndrome Foundation, who also, is they focus on education and their I've lost my train of thought here. They focus on their research, their medical care, their education and advocacy, and they do a lot of advocacy as far as making sure that our loved ones with disabilities are the voices are heard, and we're getting funding that we deserve, especially in the Down syndrome community. It's quite interesting that the Down syndrome community doesn't get funded as much for some of the research, but yet we're one of the most common genetic conditions out there, and so that's
The most
something that,
common genetic
yes, that
condition
we
in
are
the
the
world.
most. So
Yeah, but I doubt the NIH will listen to this podcast, but we should say thank you to the NIH for the tens of millions of dollars that were recently released in the last 2 or 3
Oh
years.
my gosh, yes, I
So,
know. It's so exciting.
thanks to organizations like Global and advocates across the world, or I guess the country. So, yeah, I mean, I think that is a really big piece of it. And so, you found your training through Lend, but I had Diana Abril on in an earlier podcast. She did Partners in Policy Making.
Oh yeah, that's great.
There's other big things that you can do. You could go to COPA's SEAT 1.0 or 2.0 if you're interested in specifically special education advocacy. You could do more with Ashley Barlow Company if you're interested in that. I think the key is to get more some kind of formal advocacy training if you find yourself in a way of needing it. And so that kind of leads to, some people can't. Like, we are busy as parents of children with disabilities, maybe grandparents, maybe teachers that want to do more. And so I'm curious if you can give us a little bit of a primer, kind of like Advocacy 101 from Jena Wells. After your Lend experience and all of your professional experience, what could you give some pointers or some tips that would help people that are kind of feeling like, oh, maybe let's say intimidated by their role as an advocate?
Yeah, and some of this might just be based on what you're advocating for. But like I mentioned before, I think uh, the big starting point, I guess, is to find your why, is to find your passion. What do you need to advocate for? What is your that big why is what's going to push you forward and keep you moving forward. Um, because that's what I know sometimes in advocacy it does get hard, and sometimes I get over emotional, sometimes I don't know how to handle situations, and so I have to go back to my why. Like, why am I here? Why did I get started in this particular piece of advocacy in the first place? And so that is going to be kind of your starting point. And then write your story. I think it's so important for people to write down their story and know exactly what they can say. And once you tell your story a couple of times, you will remember it. It's not something but when you're first starting out, writing it down on paper, I think it really helps you to think through, and then you can tweak it. If there's an aspect here, an aspect there that you didn't like the sound of or how you came across, you can tweak those things. But your story is really going to make the biggest impact when you're advocating as well. And then just getting involved, like you said, getting involved with your local organizations, getting involved with your school district, getting involved with the people that you're going to softball practice with, wherever you can take one step in your advocacy. Like, maybe your child is only put into the the soccer game during one quarter. Well, you might have to advocate to, get more playtime. So it just depends on how small you want to start. But those are all advocacy moments. And we don't even know that they're advocacy moments when they're happening. And like I said, so it's, I think to just start small and try and find the small pockets that you're really comfortable with first. And then you can build upon it as you learn along the way, which is what I've done. Now I got to go to Washington, D.C. I got to speak with legislators, and I wouldn't have thought 5 years ago that I was going to be doing that because I wasn't there yet.
Well, and let me tell you, I mean, so I love what you say about writing it on paper, first of all. That is like an Ashley Barlow tip. Tip of the trade. I outline everything I'm going to say in any meeting with my school district, because otherwise I will be like squirrel and go on some tangent about celebrating Jack's hilarity or, something like that. And then I'm like, but wait, I actually wanted to talk about standardized tests or, something like that. So that helps me. And also certainly, I mean, if it's something emotional, it helps me stay on track too. But I remember the first time I got invited to the Buddy Walk on Washington, which is a hill day. What happens is, I don't know if NDSS still does it, but the National Down Syndrome Society had used to, and I would assume still has, this weekend where you go, and the first day you get a lot of training on, you get basic advocacy training, how to make an ask and how to behave in a congressperson's office, what to call them, that sort of thing. And then you get trained on what the specific agenda is for the organization that day. And then the next day they schedule meetings for you and you go to the different legislators. And I was intimidated as all get out.
Yeah.
But before I went, and before I'm sure you went for Lend, they give you this thing that says, okay, bring a picture of your child, tell a little bit of your story. Here's what we're going to talk about. See if you can make that pertinent to your family. If it's Medicaid, then is your family on Medicaid? Is your family having trouble getting a waiver? Has your family been on a waiver waiting list for a long time? Something like that. And so they made it, make it pertinent to your family. And all of a sudden I realized all that we are trying to do when we do legislative advocacy, when we go talk to Congress people, is we are trying to put a face with the name.
Yes.
When a Medicaid issue comes up, they're supposed to think about that wild little boy in Kentucky.
Yep.
And that way they're thinking about people. They aren't just like, Medicaid, whatever. And like, I could talk about Jack Barlow all day long. Yeah. And so if you're watching on YouTube, I'm plugging in my computer. And so, that like simply telling your story and going back to your why is really, really effective and very important in the world. And then all of a sudden when you do that, you realize, oh, they actually really care. They want to hear from their constituents.
Absolutely. And it's the same. So, right? Yeah, absolutely. And, I created a one pager. I had my son's picture all over it. I had all of his loves and his likes and what we were there for, and putting that face. And I actually do that for when I go to my son's school for his IEPs and his ETRs. And I'm sure every state has different terminology for
his evaluation, team reviews, his eligibility meetings. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I do that. I take a picture of him. I, take his vision statement, and I have pictures of him all over it because I want his face to be remembered when we're talking about him on paper. And that sometimes is really hard to do. And making that personal connection is of utmost importance.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah,
I agree with you entirely. So the last thing I want to talk about is something that I know you are very passionate about, and that is compassion fatigue, caregiver fatigue, and self-care. So I know you've spoken about this topic on a national level and that you've read a lot of the research out there. So what kind of tips can you give advocates out there, parents and caregivers, to try to focus back on themselves, even if it's just for a moment?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I listen to Brene Brown quite often, and
Me too.
she and she always says, embrace the suck. And it's like, yeah, some days I just need to embrace the suck. That's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
So I take that and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I also have to remember, by doing that, each one of us has different needs. We all function different. We all have different needs. We all have different wants. And so, in order for you to take care of yourself, you have to know what you find joy in. And so, whatever that might be, it might be, I don't know, putting your feet on grass. It might be a meditation. It might be a journal. It might be a book. It might be exercise. But it could be as small as sitting in the corner and taking a deep breath. Like, it might be literally 3 seconds long. And if that's what, you know, how you can reconnect to yourself and how you can kind of re-energize yourself, and I don't know, take some of the hardship out of your mind. That's what's really important. And so for each one of us, that can look so different. I know for me, it's getting in the car and actually driving. I like to drive. So if I am like upset about something, or if I need to really just think something through, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go for a drive. And I find a reason. Now, sometimes it might be to a grocery store. Sometimes it might be to
Get ice cream.
get ice cream. I don't know. But it is like, that's my place that I can kind of decompress, and I just, it helps me to just get in the car and drive someplace, and it can only be around the corner. It doesn't have to be a long drive, but it really does help me to get out of my house. It helps me to listen to some music maybe in the car. It helps me to, sometimes I'm singing at the top of my lungs, and my lovely neighbor sitting next to me at the stoplight is laughing at me. But I need, it just depends on the day. But I think really finding your joy, and then making sure and asking yourself, how often do you need that? And is it sustainable? Because if you find something, like some people might say, well, I just need a vacation. Well, that's nice. It's great to go on a vacation, but you don't get to do that as often. So is there something that you can do on a smaller scale that's a little bit more sustainable than just waiting for that next vacation? Because it might build up over time, and we don't want that. So trying to find some of the smaller things in your daily life, that helps. And I started running. It's been fantastic. I walk. If I don't run, I at least walk. It's hard to find time. I mean, I have 4 boys and a dog that doesn't leave me alone either. So it's challenging to find the time. And so sometimes that's when, you just need a few seconds here or there.
Yeah, and I think I love the way that you focused on the human, the person,
Mhm.
instead of the actual act,
Yeah.
because to me that's exactly what it is remembering. I feel like parents of children with disabilities are pulled in so many different directions, and we have somebody that might need us more,
Hmm.
even if it only applies to school. We have so much more um, uh, stress or needs that are placed on us. And then we still have the ordinary needs of being a sister or a brother and a daughter or a son and an employee or a business owner, or, all of those other roles that we wear. And sometimes you kind of lose sense of yourself because you're giving to other
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love the way you say, like, don't forget that you're you. So think about what you need and
Yes.
do something for yourself, even if it's just a minute. That's super important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Jena, you have been so helpful and such an informative guest. So I hope that your episode today has inspired a few people to go out and improve their advocacy skills with some trainings, some research, some connections with other people. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have to have you back to talk about some more advocacy topics.
Absolutely. I would come back anytime. Thanks for welcoming me here on your podcast. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
It sure has been. Thank you.